was the fall of 1993, and I found myself in the small town of Americus, Georgia, 3 hours south of Atlanta. And I was sitting in the office of the president and CEO and founder of Habitat for Humanity International, Millard Fuller. And he got right to the point. He said, "David, I've got 3 questions for you. Number 1, why do you want to work for Habitat for Humanity?" These TED Talks are all about how and why. Really good question. Question number 2, a little bit more tactical. What do you know about direct mail? Now, what you need to know is that at that time, Habitat for Humanity received 80% of their funds through direct mail, and Millard had actually made millions of dollars in the early 60s through direct mail. And then the third question that he asked was, he said, "David, you know," he was from Lanett, Alabama, and he said, "Down here in the South, we have a phrase. And the phrase is, what melts your butter? What do you get excited about? What are you passionate about? What do you get out of bed thinking about and hoping for? What melts your butter?" Well, you know, it's an interesting question. It's a question we should ask all of ourselves. And it reminded me that 12 years earlier, I was driving to work one day as a newly minted accountant for the Shell Oil Company. And I was listening to the radio. And the Gallup organization had just come out with a new poll. And the poll said that 70% of all Americans, if given the choice, would choose to do something different from a vocational standpoint than what they were doing today. 70% of all Americans were essentially hoping to be doing something other than they were doing. And I remember thinking, wow, that is really sad. 70% of all Americans wish they were somewhere else. And then I realized something. I was part of that 70%. Now, judging the age of the crowd in this auditorium, many of you may not know this movie, but you can talk to your parents or grandparents. But a long time ago, there was a movie called The Graduate, and a young Dustin Hoffman was a high school student, kind of confused, not knowing what his future was going to be like, not knowing what his hope was in, and a guy comes up to him and he says, "I've got one word." Anybody remember what the word was? Plastics. Right. The future is in plastics. You should put your hope in plastics. Well, when I was a high school senior, my Uncle Harold came to me and said, "I've got one word for you: accounting." And that's how I found myself driving to work as an accountant for a Shell Oil Company. Not the way you should pick what your profession is. It wasn't what melted my butter. There are people that have a passion for accounting, believe it or not. I just wasn't one of them. Every year in the United States, there are 27,000 children who are born or who are diagnosed with a life-threatening medical condition. And when that diagnosis happens, their world and their family's world turns upside down. Instead of thinking about sports, instead of thinking about school and grades and boys and girls and all the things that all of our families think about, there's a whole new vocabulary that comes into their lives. Words like chemotherapy, radiation, surgeries, doctor's visits, waiting rooms. And in the midst of all that anxiety about the future, MakeAWish enters their world. And MakeAWish enters their world with a very simple question. And the question is, if you could wish for anything, what would it be? And with that, a child starts thinking, number 1, about something besides their illness. But number 2, even more powerfully, what could that be? Do you mean I could go anywhere? I could meet anybody? I could have anything? I could be anything? and they start dreaming, and they start hoping. They start thinking about, what are they passionate about? What melts their butter? My premise is that hope is one of the most powerful tools, one of the most powerful ideas we have in this world at our disposal. I want to tell you about somebody who this year celebrated her 30th anniversary of her wish that took place back in 1988. Tiffany Rowell was a 16-year-old teenager in school when she was diagnosed with bone marrow failure. Terminal diagnosis. She fights it. She thinks she overcomes it. She goes into remission. It comes back again, a second terminal diagnosis. The doctors go to her and say, hey, you are eligible for a wish. Well, Tiffany's dream, what she always dreamed about, what she always hoped to be, was a dancer. She loved to dance. And there was a particular person that she emulated in terms of this fabulous entertainer who was not just a great singer, just not a great composer, but a fabulous dancer. And so when it came time for her to decide what her wish was to meet Michael Jackson. So one day, unbeknownst to her, while she's in the school cafeteria, all of a sudden music starts playing over the loudspeaker from the latest album, Thriller, and in comes in a guy, an impersonator of Michael Jackson, and goes right up to Tiffany in front of the whole school and says that her wish to meet Michael Jackson is going to be granted. And so sure enough, she, a few weeks later, she gets to meet Michael Jackson, and then unbeknownst to her, as she is watching him in concert, he asks her to come up on stage and to dance with him. And if Tiffany were here right now, what she would tell you is that at that moment, she went from surviving to thriving. That wish experience got her head back in the game. Today, I'm thrilled to tell you that Tiffany Rowell is a mother of 2. She's 46 years old, and she will tell you that wish experience saved her life. It's the power of hope. There's a young man who just a few years ago was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. He was having a number of seizures, daily seizures so bad that it was a life-threatening illness. He was being treated at a hospital in the Midwest, and his primary physician was a neurosurgeon. They couldn't figure out what was causing these seizures, and so. And again, because of the seriousness of his illness, he qualified for a wish. Well, Deshaun loves basketball. Because of seizures, he can't play it, but he loves basketball. And there was a particular player that he loved more than any other, a guy named Chris Paul. At the time, Chris Paul played for the Los Angeles Clippers. Now he's at the Houston Rockets. And so he's able to go out to Los Angeles. He meets with Chris Paul. He gets to meet Blake Griffin. He gets to hang out with the team. He gets to go to a game. He has an unbelievable experience. A couple weeks later, it's time for him to come back, time for an appointment, a checkup with his neurosurgeon. And he sits down with his doctor, and the doctor says, so Deshaun, tell me, how many seizures did you average since I last saw you? The answer, none. At which point he says, well, how many seizures have you had since you've been gone? His answer, none. How many seizures do you think Deshaun has had since then? None. What's going on? So this neurosurgeon was so perplexed by this, he has since commissioned a study to take a look at kids being treated at this hospital those who have received wishes versus those who have not, to figure out, is there something there? Is there something there in terms of the power that hope and passion can have on the medical outcome of a child? In a couple months, I'm going to be joining another organization called Genesis Works. Genesis Works works with low-income students who are having a tough time. They're juniors in high school, they're not on a great trajectory. Unless there's something that happens, they are not going to do well. 25% of all ninth grade students of low-income families in this country will not graduate with a high school degree. Of those who do, that go to college, only 14% will end up completing college and getting a bachelor's degree. At the same time, in this country, US employers have 7 million jobs that they can't fill, entry-level positions, because they can't get the talent that they need to be able to fill those jobs. What Genesis Works does is provide a young program that involves training, but most importantly, a schedule during their senior year in high school where they compress their classroom schedule so that they can have a 20-hour-a-week paid internship in a professional environment. Sounds pretty simple, and yet the impact is unbelievable. Within 5 years, those students are earning a third higher than the national average, between $45,000 and $50,000 a year. So I want to tell you about two people. One is Jordan. She was a high school junior, not good grades, in a school not doing well, living with her mom. When I met with her and spoke with her, she said, you know, I still don't know what my ultimate future is going to be, but I know what my future was going to be if this program didn't occur. I'd be living with my mom in San Antonio and trying to figure out what fast food place I was going to be working in. And now she did an internship. That company came back to her and said, we would like for you to work here full time. And at the same time, she is getting college credit. And if you were to talk to her and see the passion and the enthusiasm that she has for her life, for her future, it's amazing. It's breaking the cycle of poverty. I want you to meet Hector. Hector was in the very first class of Genesis Works. He was first approached about an internship. He said, no, I got a job at Subway. He was working at Subway. He was robbed at gunpoint. Made him think, I think that internship might not be a bad idea. Goes back, gets the internship, does well. As a result of that, applies to college, gets into college. Because he's at a university, he sees a college internship, decides to compete for it, gets it, an internship with Hewlett-Packard, gets the internship, which turns into an offer, which turns into a 10-year career with Hewlett-Packard. He recently left to go work for a technology company in Austin. Friend, this is what hope can do. This is what following your passion can do. You know, every year, the most watched event in the country is the Super Bowl. All year long, these elite athletes compete and fight week in and week out so that they can play in this event. And one of those teams is going to hold this trophy. This trophy is the Lombardi Trophy, named after Coach Vince Lombardi, one of the greatest coaches of the NFL, of the Green Bay Packers. Vince Lombardi had a lot of famous quotes. Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing, and some others. But Vince Lombardi also had another quote. And his quote was, "Hope is not a strategy." Now, I get what he was saying. He was saying, hey, you can't just hope for things to happen. You know, you have to plan. You have to prepare. You have to work hard. I get that. But hope is a strategy. Hope is one of the greatest tools we have. Hope can actually turn out different medical outcomes for kids who are fighting for their lives. Hope can change generations of poverty, the cycle of poverty. Hope is one of the most powerful attributes, tools that we have. I will close with this. One of my favorite movies is a movie of The Shawshank Redemption. And one of the best lines in the movie, I believe, is when Andy Dufresne is talking to his friend, Red, and he says, hope is a good thing. In fact, it may be the best of things. And good things never die. Friends, hope is a great strategy, maybe the best one that I know. Thank you.